Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I want to just speak from the heart and be rather just authentic. And listen, I was listening to the testimony earlier, and what we always fear, you know, as a child, you'd fear the boogeyman and the six-armed lady in the closet and all these, you know, illogical fears that we have. But unfortunately, there are folks that are in the wrong place at the wrong time with evil that lurks. Mr. Wolf, you were one of those folks, you know, being there. It's horrific, as my colleague said, and my heart goes out to you. What I want to avoid, though, is to place blame on people that have a different political philosophy, because the vast majority, and I'm talking 99.999, and you just keep going, of Americans don't want to harm anyone and don't harm anyone. And so to place blame on an ideology, because I think you said earlier right-wing extremism, I caught that, and I'm sorry because we were running different hearings. And do you fear, Mr. Wolf, left-wing extremism?
I would say that based on the Department of Homeland Security's recent report that said domestic terror threats are focused right now on communities like mine, that has driven fear around how the rhetoric people use about LGBTQ people may result in violence.
So you don't. So you don't fear left-wing extremism.
You have an example of a left-wing extremist
Do you know who
engaging in anti-LGBTQ
Do you know who James
violence?
T. Hodgkinson is?
I don't.
Okay. Do you know of any historical incidents where there were multiple members of Congress murdered or assassinated? Are you aware of any? Our country's 250-year history.
Yes.
I'm not aware of any multiple incidents like that. I don't think it has happened, fortunately, in history, because we go down a very dark tunnel if it did occur. But it almost did occur. A few years back, James T. Hodgkinson shot Steve Scalise, who's now the majority leader, will soon be the majority leader in the next Congress, and almost killed him. And was asked, do you know James T. Hodgkinson's political affiliation? He was a Bernie Sanders acolyte. He was a big fan of Bernie Sanders. None of us blamed Bernie Sanders for that shooting because he didn't do it. Now, there's rhetoric on that side that could encourage very unstable people, but unstable people are dangerous inherently. And the thing is, if Steve Scalise wasn't there because he had a detail, because he was, I believe, the minority whip at the time, I wasn't here, he had a security detail that ended up eliminating that threat and killing that man. Had he not been there, you're probably looking at 15 to 20 Republican members of Congress that would have been murdered. He even asked, because they were at a baseball practice in the morning, he even asked, are you Republicans? And when they said yes, that's when the rifle came out and that's when the gun came out. The only person responsible for that shooting was that man, no one else. And that's what we had, and I'm trying to be very careful about that, because would you agree that this is something that a member of Congress should say, talking about folks that we disagree with? There were several quotes. Sorry. That's what happens when you go on to multiple committee hearings here. Would you agree with this? If a Republican said, we got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active, and we've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know we mean business. You find that incendiary at all?
If we're talking about peacefully protesting injustice,
Confrontational, getting in their face. There needs to be unrest in the streets. You think that could be incendiary at all?
I don't know the context of what you're talking about.
All right, well, there was Ariana Presley and Maxine Waters, Democratic members of Congress, said that. And, you know, I don't want people to get in somebody's face and get confrontational. They can certainly disagree, and we can disagree civilly. But the Pulse nightclub shooting, was that perpetrated by a right-wing extremist?
The Pulse nightclub shooting was perpetrated by a man who pledged allegiance to ISIS.
So the answer to that question would be no.
I don't know what his...
I don't think there's many ISIS members that are terrorists and also GOP voters. In fact, I would venture a guess that doesn't exist on the planet.
To clarify, I didn't say GOP voters.
Okay. You said right-wing extremists. So we would classify the evil individual that murdered 49 and wounded 53 and probably gives you nightmares and will for the rest of your life. It was not a right-wing extremist.
Was that a question?
Yes.
I would say this hearing is about the structural and systemic issues that are escalating anti-LGBTQ violence.
Well, you know, we got to be careful about our language, because we don't want to point fingers at anybody other than the people that actually perpetrate this evil and this criminal violence. We have a method of redress in this country. We're very free to do so, And that's why I've always condemned all political violence, because there's no need for it, because we do have the right to protest. And I am very sorry about what you and those other victims went through. It's horrific, and I'm praying for you. God bless.
Gentleman's
Thank
time
you.
has expired.
Yield back.
The gentlewoman from Missouri, Ms. Bush, is now recognized for 5 minutes. Ms. Bush?
Yes, St. Louis, and I thank you, Madam Chair, for convening this important hearing. And let me say to the witnesses, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for staying. And sorry you have to listen to the white supremacy raise its ugly head, throughout this hearing, but we're here to fight it. And so I just want to make sure you know that. The rise of hate and violence against the
Madam Chair,
LGBTQIA community
my
follows
God.
a surge of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation driven by Republican state lawmakers, including in my home state of Missouri. The Human Rights Campaign has found that Republican state legislators have introduced and supported over 340 anti-queer and or trans bills in the latest legislative session, and 25 extreme discriminatory bills have already been signed into law across this country. According to Promo Missouri, in 2020, the Missouri State House introduced 23 pieces of anti-LGBT plus legislation. They've repeatedly, it's absolutely disgusting, filed library book bans, bans on doctor-recommended care, student organization bans, and sports bans. Ms. Robinson, could you tell us more about the draconian measures state Republicans have advanced that target the health, the safety, and the rights of our LGBT plus community?
It's a crisis that we're experiencing. We are trying to simply be able to live freely, safely, and wholly as our true selves in every aspect of life. And what we see is continued legislative attacks paired with extremist rhetoric. And when some of these bills are moving forward, whether or not they're enacted, it has a devastating impact on our community. Looking at Florida again, as a Don't Say Gay or Trans bill was moving in state legislature, we saw it paired with an intentional social media campaign that resulted in a 400% increase in anti-LGBTQ plus hate and slurs happening online. And the majority of it was perpetuated by 10 bad actors. This is the stuff that we have to make sure that we're interrupting and ending. This is what's creating a dangerous environment for our children, for our kids, and for our families.
Thank you. Hate drives these Republican bills, which in turn drive dangerous hate and violence towards our LGBTQ plus community. In Missouri, my state, we have seen multiple hate-driven murders of our trans siblings in recent years. As part of Missouri's Republicans' obsessive attack on trans and gay rights, they introduced legislation that would have criminalized parents and health services for providing care approved by the American Academy of Pediatrics and other leading organizations. They even sought to turn bills into ballot initiatives to drum up further hate and have run for office on platforms grounded in anti-LGBTQ plus hate. Dr. Meyer, what is the connection between the Republican crusade to target the LGBTQ plus community and the surge of hateful anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric online?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that this rhetoric fuels, as I said before, what is already underlying American culture and history. And to fan these hateful messages just encourages bad actors. And I agree with what was said here. There are bad actors, but we also have to pay attention to the environment in which we live, and the kind of environment either inhibits or encourages hateful acts. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hunt, let me turn to you. How is America's transgender community disproportionately harmed by the extremism and the violence the committee is examining today, particularly speaking about Black and brown transgender women?
One thing that we see repeatedly in the studies that we've done on the trans population is that trans people are about, on average, 3 to 4 times as likely to experience almost any negative outcome that you can expect in our society, be that unemployment, direct violence, negative experiences with the police, homelessness, discrimination in healthcare, anything along those lines, tends to hit trans people about 3 to 5 times as high as the national, 3 to 5 times as much as the national average. And what we see consistently through all of these numbers is that trans people of color, and particularly Black trans women and Indigenous trans women, experience 3 to 4 times as high negative results or negative outcomes on all of those factors.
Thank you. The rise of anti-queer and/or trans extremism is a danger to our country, our nation, and we must act swiftly and urgently to eliminate it. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady